we're uh, while we're waiting to get going, if you want to leave your name and where you're from over in the chat, that's always fun to see all the different pockets of America that show up in these calls. I'm calling you today from Portland, Oregon. Ariel is my neighbor in Kaiser. And Laura, we got some good Oregon contingent here today. Represent.
And then next weekend is the big March On for Voting Rights. So here is the link. There are 25 across the country. So there is the link that you can see if there is one near you.
Great. Many thanks to everybody who are filing in now. I think we'll go ahead and push the go button here because we're a couple minutes over. People will keep filing in for the next few minutes, but big welcome. Super excited to see everybody. I look probably cleaner cut than the last time you saw me. I got a haircut. I took all the gruff off my face after my vacation.
New headphones.
And I have now I'm was it Millennium Falcon?
Yeah. The double earphones are gone now.
The double earphones are gone, right? So thank you everybody for coming. There's a lot going on right now, obviously, with the Afghanistan news this week and the horrible situation over there. From our team's perspective, trying to message well on that, while also trying to keep in the sort of rapid fire environment online around that right now, trying to make sure that we're also keeping on message with the domestic policy agenda items that we need to push, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today. Before we go to our extremely special guests, I'm going to hand it over to Jamie, who is going to give us a rundown of some stuff that we should expect in the next week so that we can be prepared with our messaging. So Jamie?
So today, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act was introduced in the 117th Congress. Here is the tweet announcing it. They made some changes from last time. So the changes in this is going to be, it kind of creates a new formula for identifying discriminatory election practices in states and jurisdictions that will need pre-clearance, which will allow the Department of Justice to review the local laws. It reinstates the provisions in the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court recently gutted in the Brockovich versus the DNC decision. So it will re-enable judicial review after an election law is enacted. So in a report outlining the need for the new pre-clearance formula, the committee detailed 6 aspects of modern election laws that are discriminatory and should be reviewed under the Voting Rights Act. These practices include voter roll purges, voter identification, citizenship requirements, lack of access to language assistance, polling place closures, changes in wait times, limited access to early or non-election day voting, and changes to jurisdictional boundaries and redistricting. So we are expecting this vote to move very quickly. The House comes back into session next Monday, and it could be called for a vote as early as Tuesday. So this is what Speaker Pelosi said today. Congress not only has an ironclad constitutional mandate, but a moral responsibility to act HR 4 to combat destructive and discriminatory voter suppression. In doing so, we live up to the powerful legacy of this bill's namesake, Congressman Lewis, a titan of the civil rights movement. So everyone's job for the next week is to call your congressman and say, yes, yes, yes. We are expecting a couple R's to vote with the D's, but not many. But the more pressure we put, the the better chance we have. So I want to do a quick update because I don't want to take away from Senator Jones. So I'm going to turn it over to Lori now.
And one thing I think that's important about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is it doesn't look back at laws that have already been enacted. So, as we look at some of the voting rights legislation that I believe the senator is going to talk about today, we still need that because we've got to deal with what's been passed in the past year. John Lewis Act would only look forward at new laws.
Yeah, absolutely. We need both. The compromise bill is not expected to be released until the Senate comes back into session.
Okay, with that quick update, I want to introduce David Yankovich. He is Senior Advisor to DemCast and a very good friend to us and to me. And he's going to introduce the other handsome fellow with him. And we're very excited to have both of them on. It's really important that we get some honest talk and about what we can accomplish and what we may have to give up in order to get the critical things done. And these two guys are the ones to help us figure that out and navigate that that path ahead. I do want to mention, if you have questions for the senator as we go along, if you will put it in the Q&A, it just helps us find the questions better. And we will take some time to answer that, towards the end. All right, with that being said, I will drop off and hand it over to David.
All right, thanks, Lori. I don't know how handsome the other guy is on this, I've known him for a little bit. He's better on camera, but this is always cool. I've been working with the senator for a long time. Obviously, you see the poster behind me. About 3 years ago, 4 or 5, I don't even know how long it's been. I got a call from a guy named Joe Trippi, with one of the smartest people in the party, and he said that there's this guy in Alabama. It's a 40-point underdog. It's going to be one of the hardest races. I looked it up, and he took on the Klan twice and beat them, and took on the abortion bombers and did that. I was like, get me the hell to Alabama. I need to do this. One of my favorite people in the world. So it's really cool to have the senator here with me and with you guys here tonight, and really just kind of hit this hard. We really want to give you honest feedback. We want to tell you what's possible, what's not possible, and really just straight talk. No bullshit on this call. It's going to be us just trying to really get to the bottom of everything and really get the messaging out there that we need to be able to win. So Senator, welcome. Thanks for coming on. We love you. Everybody here is excited.
Thanks, David. It's great to be back with everybody. Really appreciate all the DemCast and Nick and Laurie, Jamie, all that you guys do, and all the folks that are on here tonight, all that you do, getting our message out and keeping all these issues front and center. It's just so important. So I'm really excited to be back with you tonight.
Awesome. Well, what do you think? I mean, today's been a pretty interesting day. Terry Sewell, one of your good buddies down there, introduced a new amendment to the Voting Rights Act. What do you think on that?
Well, it's a great bill. I mean, and I think that they've done a lot of work to try to take what the court has done in the last 2 big cases, the Shelby County case, the Abramovich case that came out not long ago, and try to fine tune the Voting Rights Act so it would pass constitutional muster. I think it's pretty obvious, David, that the courts, and particularly the Supreme Court and Justice Robert, are no friends of the Voting Rights Act. And so you really got to fine tune this a little bit. So I really am excited that they went ahead and introduced this. I hope they do get it to a vote. What I'm really looking for, though, is how that might play into the bill that I call a Mansion Plus type bill that I know is coming as soon as the Senate gets back into session. But these things going forward, they're just really very important. But this other bill, I think, is going to be the critical one to see whether or not we can break the logjam on voting rights.
Well, you did a really interesting article in USA Today a couple of weeks ago, and you were talking about this. Right now the Senate's in recess. We didn't get anything done before they went to recess. What's the difference between HR 1, HR 4 here, and then the Mansion Plus bill that you think that's going to be easier to kind of get through, or at least a better bill?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a better bill because it's number one, it's, look, we got to understand what all has happened since HR1 was first passed. We've had a lot of things enacted, a lot of things that are going on. And we've essentially got, in terms of voting, the equivalent of the California and Oregon wildfires. And they're getting out of control. And we've got to figure out what to do. HR1 is a great bill. It contains a lot of really good stuff involving dark money, involving a number of things. But those are poison pills for a number of people. And it doesn't do anything to make sure people get access to the ballot box. And that's where we've got to really focus right now. And so what I think's happening, Senator Manchin had a bill that was not everything that people wanted, but it was at least something that he thought could get done. It got cold water thrown all over it, which I think is an interesting signal to him, by the way. But the fact is, he really focused on the laws that we call the voter suppression laws, the voter subversion laws. And I think the Manchin Plus bill, Senator Manchin is working hard on this, as is Senator Warnock, Senator Kane, Senator Klobuchar, Tester, and some others. And I think they're putting together a bill that they believe has some real teeth in it that goes directly to the issues that we're facing right now. And it kind of doesn't get involved in the dark money. It doesn't get involved in statehood for DC or Puerto Rico. All of that's important, but I got to tell you, if we don't do the things necessary about the voting rights right now, those things are never going to come to pass anyway. So I think they're looking at the crisis that's in front of us and focusing on that. And one of the things that I put in this op-ed is, I think, so important as we go forward right now. Not waiting for the Senate to get back in session, not waiting to see the actual bill itself. I think we need to start, messaging a little bit about how this new bill that will create uniform standards across the country will, in fact, instill confidence on both sides of the aisle. Right now, we've got a confidence crisis because Republicans think the election was stolen. Their biggest concern is election fraud. And while Democrats think that the right to vote is under attack and they're concerned about voter suppression, what this Manchin Plus bill will do is take care of all of that, because it has uniform standards across the board, so that the folks in Alabama are playing by the same rules as folks in Georgia and California and New York, Texas, wherever. That instills confidence. And I think that's an important message that we need to get across right now. We need to be taking our message not just to our own people about voter suppression, but we need to be taking it to independents and moderate Republicans to say, this bill will stop voter fraud better than anything that these states are doing, which, by the way, will not stop voter fraud at all. They don't do it. And that message has not been getting out.
So on social media, especially a lot of the, the people on the call here, they've been pushing HR1 now for 2 years, almost a year. That's a bill, in my opinion, and I'm sure, you'll get to this too. I don't think that it can get through the Senate as it is. Maybe provisions of it breaking up. How do we message on that? Like out there, tweeting, pushing, like how are we supposed to get any kind of, coordination done to what's the message here?
I think we need to talk about democracy, not HR1. We need to talk about democracy. We need to talk about voting rights. We need to talk about access to the ballot. We need to talk about making the election secure. Remember all of these laws. Think about this. Nobody is really talking about this. And I've been trying to get people for the last 3 months to talk about this a little bit.
3 months?
At least 3 or 4 or 12. I don't know. But nobody is really looking at these laws and saying much other than it's going to suppress the vote in Black and brown communities, which it is. And that's an important message. But you know what? It's also going to suppress the vote in rural areas too, people that have trouble getting to the polls. That's what Reverend Barber of the Poor People's Campaign keeps talking about, that this is not just a race issue. The other thing is, if you look at these bills, David, that Georgia, Texas, all these states are passing, they don't do anything to stop voter fraud, and no one has challenged them on that. Think about this. Some of these laws decrease the number of hours that you can vote on election day by 2 hours. You can only vote from 7 to 5 instead of 7 to 7, as if fraudsters only come out at night. or it says you can't vote on Sunday mornings, only Sunday afternoon. So all the fraudsters are running around while everybody's in church, or they're even fraudsters are the ones giving out bottled water. Come on, give me a break. But no one is really challenging, and you couple that by saying those laws are not going to do what you want it to, and whether it's right or wrong about the election steal and voter fraud in 2020, that's not really the point. The point is these laws don't do it. But this bill that's coming up and certain provisions of HR 1, which creates these national uniform standards for voting, minimum days for absentee ballot voting, minimum days for mail-in voting, those kind of things, these national standards, that's what creates the confidence that everybody has. When we're all playing on the same sheet of music and you don't have 50 different states not only having their different laws, but interpreting them differently, that's, you instill confidence with these national standards. So I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about voter suppression at all, because it is a big, big problem. But we also need to take our messaging some to the people that we're trying to convince. We have convinced our folks. We know that people in our silos know this and they believe it. Let's try to convince some of these other folks to get on board with this and tell the Collins of the world and the Murkowskis and the Romneys and some of these others that this is going to be good for your state. It's going to be good for the rural folks, and it will protect the integrity of the ballot box.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and like the Republicans, they're uniform. They're all on the same task. They all, I mean, for the most part, except for maybe a few senators like Romney here and there, like you've said this to me before, they're pretty much uniform. The Democrats, on the other hand, we're not. We're the big tent party. We're everywhere. We're trying to do everything, but we're also fighting amongst ourselves like crazy. And I wonder, in this climate, like how do we? It's not just negotiating with the Republicans to get this passed. How do we negotiate with the Democrats? How do we reach everybody here to do that?
Well, I think, David, you talk about, okay, let's stop and take a look back and say, what's most important to you? And some people say, well, stopping voter suppression. No, come on. What's really the most important thing? The most important thing is giving people access to the ballot box. We always frame it in the negative. The most important thing for everybody in the Democratic Party, it doesn't matter where you are in the party under that big tent. The most important thing for people is democracy and protecting that right to vote, giving everyone as easy an access to the ballot box as possible. And so how do you do that? Well, that's when you start talking about these issues. And look, again, I want to make sure everybody understands, I'm a proponent of HR 1. It's a great bill. But the fact of the matter is it goes so much further than the fires that are in front of us. We have got to put these fires out before we get to those other issues, because the other issues are going to be for naught if we don't protect our democracy. So I think you can pull people in by saying, HR 1 is a great bill, but as a bill, it's not the hill to die on. But the right to vote, democracy, is a hill to die on. And that's what we've got to make sure that we do. And I think what you're seeing now, there is a lot of work going on this bill with some really, really good people who care about this, and they're working together to try to focus this on the issues that are facing us, the challenges that we've got right now. And I think that you're going to see a really good bill come out of this. It's not going to be everything that people want. It's not going to be DC statehood or Puerto Rico statehood. It's not going to be dark money. It's not going to be things like that, but it will have uniform standards. It's likely to have same-day voter registration. It's likely to have issues about redistricting and nonpartisan drawing of district lines, which is really the future of this country, by the way, folks. So I think as we start messaging between now and the Senate, we talk about the Voting Rights Act and we can talk about John Lewis, but let's spend more time just talking about democracy and the right to vote and giving people more access, easy access, because at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure everybody has equal access to vote. And then it will be up to us. It will be up to each of us to try to get our people out to vote and engage them so that they will exercise that right that we're trying to protect for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I hear you. And so, I mean, democracy, when we say that, fighting for democracy, it's become such a buzzword. It's almost a buzzword to the point where no one really hears it anymore. And so like getting into the nitty gritty on this, and talking about like the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Act, HR 1, like what are, like, I know you're talking about the uniform standards and doing that, but when we're talking to the left, when we're talking to the right, what's one of the really good messages here? Because you've done this, you've negotiated both sides of this, when you were in the Senate, I mean, you worked with Ted Cruz to get one of your bills passed, you work with the left to get, things done. Like, what is it that we like, because on social media, there's no unified message. There's nobody out there except for DemCast that's really trying to push, a coordinated message out. But the thing is on the leadership side of it, and I'm not trashing the Democratic Party at all. I mean, they're doing the best they can, but we don't have that message. So when we get into the voting rights, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here and keep asking the same question, but for us as the activists right now on social media, I mean, should we be pushing HR 1? Should we?
No, push HR 1 right now. It's there. Everybody knows it exists. You've got to push the voting rights. You got to push access to the polls. You got to push, and I will just disagree with you, David. By God,
You're not allowed to do that.
I am not going to give up on democracy. Okay, I have watched for too long Republicans co-opt words like patriots and patriotism and things like that. I am not going to give in on democracy, because I'm going to tell you, when you look at the things that are going on the other side, look what happened on January 6th. Do you think that was democracy? Do you think that those supporters of Donald Trump were patriots and people that were trying to protect democracy, as opposed to a cult-like figure that they wanted to make sure that they install as an omnipotent leader? That was not democracy. We are fighting for democracy. We're making sure that, and so I'm not giving up on that message, because I think it's the most powerful message that we have. And if we don't continue to talk about that, we've got to contrast that with what the other side is doing. And what the other side is doing is so undemocratic, it's unbelievable. Taking away people's right to vote, making it more difficult for folks to vote, making sure that people vote on their terms and not their own terms. And so I think if we have to talk about democracy, but I would not, just as me, you don't hear me, talking about HR 1 very much. I want to talk about voting rights, because that's what's under siege right now. The right to get to the ballot box and to vote and to cast that ballot freely, with ease, making sure that we get those numbers back up. And I think we have to couch it that way. I really do believe that we have to talk about voting rights and giving everyone. And quite frankly, there's a lot of great lines that you can use if you go back and you look at what Ronald Reagan said, and a lot of the Republicans that are in Congress now, and look what was said in 1965 by people like Margaret Chase Smith, Republican from Maine. When my friend Susan Collins says, well, we don't really have a problem in Maine. Well, they don't. Congratulations. But you know what? You got problems in other states. And this is more than just simply about one state. It's about the United States. And I think that we can talk about that in uniform standards. I think people are going to say, you know what? I vote in, name your state. I vote in Alabama, and I want to make sure that the rules in my state, I'm playing by the same rules that you guys are playing. I don't want anybody to have an advantage, and I damn sure don't want anybody to have a disadvantage. Play by the same rules. The military does it. People across the country do it. Play by the same rules. And don't let anybody tell you that this is a states' rights issue, that Congress really needs to stay out of this. That's just crap. I mean, the Constitution specifically says Congress has this authority in federal elections. You can't control the city elections and things like that, but you can control every 2 years when there's a member of Congress on the ballot. And we got federal elections every 2 years in the state. So I think you can, but for God's sakes, David, don't give up on democracy.
I'm not saying give up on democracy. I'm saying that the buzzwords of it don't resonate on social media as strongly as.
Well, then we need to make them resonate. We need to make them resonate. That's your job. You're the social media guru. At least you claim to be. So make it resonate.
I claim to be, but here we go. He's beating me up online here. One of the other things here too is how much danger are we really in here? I mean, because like if we don't get voting rights passed, I mean, I imagine that in 2022 we're going to go through hell. I mean, every other bill that we need to get done, every other thing we need to get passed, that's completely based on the voting rights right now, right? I mean, that's the whole damn ballgame.
Look, we're in a tough spot. Okay. Yeah, we've got the president. The president, by the way, is wounded right now. He is going to be wounded for some time with this Afghanistan thing. He is wounded. He is not out of he's by no means knocked out, but he is wounded. There's no question. We have to acknowledge that. And that's going to suck a lot of air up. Even when Congress comes back, it's going to suck a lot of the air up politically in Washington, D.C. But we have a very narrow majority in the House. We have no majority in the Senate. So we've got to make sure that we get these right message. We need people to help us, David. There are not enough of us out there to run this through. There's just not. You talked about the party having a big tent, and it does. We've got to talk to ourselves a little bit and try to figure out what's important here. What do we, at the end of the day, what is the most important thing that we can all accomplish together? Because Republican Party right now is a monolith. They are a radical right monolith. Yeah. And those that are not part of that radical right have been co-opted such that they just sit back and let the radical right run the show. And that's a problem for this country, by the way. We should not want the Republicans to be the radical right just because we think it might help in elections. That's not good. That is not healthy for this democracy that we're in. So right now, I think Democrats really have to make sure that we have some consistent messaging about let's getting something done. We got an infrastructure bill passed. It was not everything that a lot of Democrats wanted, but it's the first infrastructure bill that's been passed in a long time, and it's $1 trillion. And it's going to help a lot of people. It's going to help a lot of jobs.
Infrastructure week.
Infrastructure. I mean, as the president said the other day, we're on the verge of having infrastructure decade, a real infrastructure decade.
That's such a good line.
It's important, I think, that we got something done. And we did it because there were 19 or 20 Republicans who voted for it. They saw the need. The messaging got through to them that they saw how important this was to their states, to the American people, to the American economy. And I think we can do that in voting rights as well, because the future we're hanging by a thread right now. And if Texas and Georgia and Arizona and folks like that have their way, then you can pretty much write off everything else. Not because we won't, that we're going to lose the House and the Senate, because we likely will. And it's going to be tough for a long, long, long time. Now is the time. And that's why I said our messaging right now between now and when the Senate comes back is really important. Support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act when it passes the House. Get it all out there. I'm all for that. But start telling the United States Senate to pass voting rights legislation. You don't have to put a number on it. Voting rights legislation. They'll know what you're talking about. Protect the right to vote. Protect democracy. Have everybody playing off the same page.
Now, on that note there, is it still possible for Democrats and Republicans to work together in the Senate? I mean, you did it a little bit there. Do you think it's still possible for us to get it done?
Sure, it's possible. It's tough. I mean, I will tell you it's tough. I mean, I think, we got the infrastructure bill passed because they really kind of just knuckled down and decided, where can we come together? Where can we find the common ground? There are people on the radical right, and there are people in the Democratic Party that don't want they don't like the word compromise. So I don't use it. I use just finding common ground, and they found a lot of common ground, $1 trillion worth of common ground that is really going to help this country with a crumbling infrastructure, putting broadband in rural areas, putting money into roads and bridges that are crumbling, doing those things necessary. All of that creates jobs, by the way, and helps boost the economy. So yeah, it can be done. It's not easy up there right now. When I've visited a couple of months ago, I mean, friends on both sides of the aisle told me that the atmosphere is still fairly toxic, and it gets a little worse. The farther we get away from January 6th, and the farther the radical right gets away from reality about what happened on January 6th, it makes it tough. But it makes it tough to deal with, to look somebody in the eye that may say that. But it is absolutely still possible. It is something that needs to be strived for every day, regardless. and finding common ground and just sucking it up and getting it done and finding that common ground. And we can do it. And I will say this, I really do believe that all pieces of the Democratic Party, everybody under the tent, has been working really hard. I don't want anything that you and I are saying here tonight to think we're throwing stones at anybody in the party, because we're not.
Just me and you. We throw stones at each other.
Well, yeah, and I've got much bigger stones to throw than you, so I'm in better shape. But
I'm not even going to touch that one.
This is one of the this is one of those moments where I think that because we saw what happened in 2016 with the election and afterwards, I think the party has really done a lot together. And there are voices out there, and they're loud voices, and there are some that I think are fairly counterproductive. But by and large, I think the party has been coming pretty well together, knowing that there are things in front of us that have to get done. There's a lot of things we want to get done, but there's some things that have to get done. And the party, I think, is coming together really better than I thought they would for that. And I'm really, really proud of all the folks up there on that.
All right. We do have a couple questions here. Amy Barron Evans, she said, I didn't see anything in Manchin's outline about stopping election subversion, i.e. all the different laws state legislators are passing that would give themselves the ability to overturn election results. Do you think that'll be included?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I think that's a big, I think that's one reason that it's taking a little bit longer, because that's the plus of the Manchin Plus bill that I wrote about, that I think is going to come, that everybody, they've got the Congressional Research Service and some really great lawyers looking at that, because that's a critical piece. And that, by the way, David, is another reason why we need to focus on these rights and democracy, and not HR 1. HR 1 doesn't deal with those at all. I mean, it doesn't deal with that at all. There's some things in there that maybe you could do it, but it still would be tough. So yes, I really believe that that's a piece of it. That's an important piece. And I know in talking with some folks up there that's an incredibly important piece. And that's why it's taken a little bit longer. They had to rewrite Manchin for a Manchin Plus with those in mind. All
right. And then Cheryl Johnson.
Good question, by the way.
Yeah, that's Amy Barron Evans. She's got actually two of them. I'll get to the second one in a second. But Cheryl Johnson asked, what provisions for absentee ballots are contained in the Manchin Plus? This affects GOP voters too, also the disabled.
Yeah, no, I don't know exactly where that's going to go. But here's what I do know, is that when Manchin had his first bill, there was pushback in different places. Overall, it got a fair amount of Democratic support, but there were a pushback in a few places. The disabled community was one area. So I think that they're taking all of that into account. I can't stress enough how much work I think has been going on with this, and the significance that these folks attest to it. And again, it's Manchin, which is really significant, but you've got Warnock, who's been leading the charge in the Senate on voting rights. You got Kane, who's always been there. But the fact that Joe's involved in this, the other aspect of this is, it's hard to believe that they're putting in this amount of time doing this kind of thing and they're going to let it fail. I just think that there are things in the works that go beyond just the bill that make sure that this bill gets passed by the United States Senate.
All right. And then Amy here, she has another question. Will there be something in the compromise bill, or do you think there'll be something in the compromise bill that can stop extreme gerrymandering before maps are drawn and passed and no longer able to be challenged? It should be writing or calling Biden. Should we be speaking out for the filibuster reform to get voting rights passed? Like, what do you think there?
I do think that the bill is, I think we're in a race against time. Okay, that's number one. The census data was out. People are working on those things now. For folks that have, for so many of the primaries that will occur, some of them, like in Alabama, the primary is in May. So those districts have to be drawn relatively quickly. And you can count on the fact that they are going to try to push those through very, very quick to try to keep any new law from being used as the basis for a challenge. There will be challenges to those to those districts regardless in so many of the states. There's already folks out there looking at that. Eric Holder's group and others are looking at challenges to what we know is coming. But it's a race against time. It's another reason to really encourage the Senate as soon as that bill drops to do what they can to get it on the floor. Now, how they get it passed is going to be, I think, the $64,000 question. Is there a chance you could get 10 Republicans? Slim. I think it would be, it's important if you get any Republicans, but I think there's got to be something in the works. I really do not believe this will be Manchin's second try. And there's too much blood, sweat, and tears going on in this right now. There's too much emotion. There's too much pushback from groups that have supported even the moderate Democrats, the union members, African-American community, others who are pushing back. And it's beginning, I think, to have an effect on everybody up there, including those that are holding out. Because at the end of the day, and by the way, there was another good op-ed that John Podesta and Wade Henderson wrote in the Washington Post this past weekend. You guys ought to see it, because it talks about the filibuster a little bit, and there's ways to reform the filibuster. And the filibuster has had its place, and folks need to understand that the filibuster hasn't just been used to perpetrate Jim Crow forever. It's been used to protect women's reproductive rights. It's been used in a lot of ways that we would agree with it, but it was always used in a way when there was good faith efforts on the part of,
both
sides, the minority. We don't have that right now. And so I just got to believe that this new bill that's coming out, I can't wait to see what it's going to be, is going to be something that we need to all rally around and try to get done quickly, because it will help on the gerrymandering issue. Manchin's original proposal dealt with that, had some things about gerrymandering. He feels pretty strong, so I'm sure that will still be in Manchin Plus.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see how that goes through. Leah, she's asking, she said your op-ed mentioned voter ID. Do you think that the Manchin Plus bill will ensure that voter ID will be easily acceptable or accessible and won't be an obstacle for people?
Yeah, I think, that's what Joe tried to do the last time. I mean, I think voter IDs we've got to just come to the conclusion that they're here to stay. And the question is not whether or not we have them. The question is whether we can get them to everybody and what voting IDs are acceptable. And Joe's original proposal expanded the acceptable IDs. That's what I mean by these uniform standards. Okay. The uniform standards of voter ID is so important these days, so that a college kid in one state can use his ID or her ID in that state, but it also could do it in the home state that if necessary. Right now in Alabama, we've got pretty restricted. I don't have a problem, frankly, with voter IDs as long as we can expand what's available, and it will then be up to us to help get those IDs in people's hands, and not forget that we got to do more than just get them registered and get an ID in their hands. We got to get them to the polls.
Yeah, I think that there's like such a lack of belief in the system, right? And you're talking about that with the uniform voting and everything, but not just that, but in government and getting things done and all of it. I want to kind of turn, we're going to have more questions here, but I kind of want to turn it, if you can, and explain to us the 16th Street bombing case and how that related to you getting the Civil Rights Cold Case Collections Act done, and how you did it with everybody's favorite character, Ted Cruz. So can you kind of walk us through, like, you don't have to give the whole history of it, but how it happened, what you saw, and then when you got to the Senate, how in the hell did you get that bill done?
Well, it was really kind of interesting because, after the bombing cases, I'm in private practice, and after this bombing case, I saw the kind of healing that those cases brought about. But I also saw that it wasn't just a conviction. It was the knowledge. It was that somebody cared. It was being able to get facts and information to a community, both a community that were victims, but also to some extent, family and descendants of those who perpetrated the crimes, who've always just kind of swept grandpa under the carpet, because of what he did. And there was a lot of healing in that. Remember, David, in South Africa, there was the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions.
Yeah.
And I'd always advocated, but we need to figure out ways. So I actually talked to Eric Holder some about trying to open these records up and do things so that historians could look at them and communities and families could look at this and understand what happened, because it helps in healing, but it also helps us understand so that we can prevent things going forward. And that was a real important thing. So this bill actually came up with some kids before I got elected to the Senate. It was their idea. I told them I would endorse it. It creates a Kennedy-like commission to get all these records, review them, make sure they're all, there's nothing super secret in it, and release them to the public. And so when they called me after I got elected and asked me to introduce it, I said, absolutely. We worked with the archives, we worked with everybody. And I'll never forget the day we introduced it. And I couldn't get any Republican co-sponsors. I could have ultimately, but I wanted to introduce it on a day when those kids were going to be sitting up in the gallery. And so I went ahead and introduced it with about 5 Democratic co-sponsors and no Republicans. And I gave a speech, pretty good speech. It was one that you didn't write, so it was probably one of my better ones.
Really?
But I gave this speech, and Ted was the presiding officer. And he stopped after about 3 seconds into my speech and started listening intently. Found me later. Doug said, that's a great idea. I'd like to help. And he did. And he not only just helped, and a lot of people were really cynical because he had a tough race going with Beto at that time. And I said, I don't care if he's doing it for political reasons or not. If he helps me, it's okay. Well, he won, and he continued to help. And then really got it. We talked about it a lot on the floor. I called him a couple of times. He got the Republicans to pass it by unanimous consent. He got Paul Ryan to put it on the floor of the House of Representatives before Congress adjourned in 2018. And it passed there with only 5 dissenting votes. Donald Trump signed it a month later. And so that bill, we're trying to get, 4 people have been nominated on the commission today. But it's one of those unlikely bedfellows that, that you find something that sparks somebody's interest, and you just kind of work and you talk about it, and you find that common ground to make sure. I did some of the same things, not on civil rights, but with some banking and financial issues with Tom Cotton. I mean, you can do that. You can do that. You've just got to continue to constantly be on the lookout for it and try to work it. And I'm still not giving up on some Republicans in the Senate to vote for a voting rights bill.
Well, I mean, I think that's going to be a tough sell, for them. But I mean, if anybody can do it, or, say it, it's you. I mean, you did that. And then, also the HBCUs, I mean, and getting that fully funded, the widow's tax. Before we kind of go into getting more into the questions at the end, can you talk about that a little bit, especially because you're most proud of the widow's, tax?
Yeah, and I'm real proud of the HBCU funding. Nobody had really taken HBCU funding on until we got up there. And it was me and Kamala Harris initially, and then Tim Scott jumped in. And we really kept pushing. It was one of those things that we really worked and got additional funding with schools that really badly needed it. And the widow's tax was an unfair, wasn't really a tax, but it was an offset that military widows or surviving spouses of military folks suffered from when they offset 2 pots of money that they were entitled to. And they've been trying for 30 years to get that eliminated. They come up there every year. And I'd never heard about this. And when they first talked to us about it, my whole office really took it on. I got Susan Collins to help co-sponsor it. Everybody, it was easy to get co-sponsors, David. Everybody wanted to help military widows. And that had happened before. Now, we ended up with 80 co-sponsors, more than anybody had ever done. But really, when it really got down to it, it was going to cost money. And that's when the rubber met the road. And in the past, it came to a screeching halt when it came to money. But we just kept working it. We got the widows to work it. We got the widows to go to the town halls. And that's what we need to do with voting rights in this this recess. When these folks are having town halls, we need to go to them. We need to have people there and not challenge them in an ugly way, but just say, why don't you want people to have an easy access to the vote? And they said, well, it's got to be secure. Well, tell me how cutting down the number of hours is going to make it more secure. I mean, it's almost like it's almost like somebody's arguing that we need to cut down the number of bank robberies in this country. So what we'll do is we'll slash the number of banks.
Yeah.
Well, you cut down the number of bank robberies, but you also cut out access to the banking system. And that's what they're doing here. So we need to have that kind of grassroots level in a real respectful way with the right messaging to some of these Democrats that could be susceptible to voting for protections. Because I'll tell you, David, some of the most celebrated Republicans in the history of the Senate are the ones like Everett Dirksen, who voted for the Voting Rights Act and the 1964 Civil Rights Act. People still talk about that today, that it was those Republicans who helped get that across.
Well, there's a lot of people out there who say people like me and you are just overly naive, that it's not possible to work with Republicans anymore, that we're completely, batshit out there trying to get anything done. What do we say to that? Like, I mean, especially because I usually take your lead, but how do we combat that? I mean, are we being completely naive? Are we insane to think that we can bring Republicans along in any capacity?
The truth is, David, it's just like what we're talking about. The truth is kind of in the middle. Are we a little more naive than others? Maybe so, but it's not quite as bad. And there's still possibilities out there. But you and I have talked about this too. We have to acknowledge that it's tougher now than it's ever been. And it's especially tough in the 50-50 Senate. And we just can't run roughshod, because that is going to be, ultimately, that's going to be counterproductive. We won't get these things enacted. We'll do it sloppily. They'll get challenged in court. And the next thing you know, we're not going to have the presidency. We're not going to have the House, and we're not going to have the Senate. And all of a sudden, things are going to get shoved down our throat. What I think we're trying to do, there will be, I think, ultimately, this voting rights will pass because there will be some type of reform or carve out.
Well, not just the voting rights, Senator, but everything we do. Here's what it is on social media. First off, Twitter is a battlefield. For
Sure.
information warfare, it's the ground trenches, but also, everybody, and I say this, or maybe not everybody, but the majority feel like, screw Republicans, don't work with them, kill the filibuster, and just go forward. And they think that we're nuts. We get beat up a lot on this, especially on social media for this. Because there's just this, not just on the voting rights, but anything at all. Right. And so we're talking about that, but, how do we combat that online? Because that's where everybody, people are pissed. The government's failing them. The system's failing, the voting's failing. People are just irate. And then on top of that, it's been 30 years of, just kind of getting beat up, whether it's the NAFTA, the trade, the unions, Janus versus AFSCME, everybody's frustrated, and then there's me and you is coming out. It's like, well, we're gonna try to work with the Republicans here. And
well,
people like,
David, you raised an interesting point there about something. On all
I usually do
all of these court cases, and guess what? All of these court cases are going against us because we got rid of the filibuster when it came time for judicial nominees. Okay, that's why you've got so many Federalist Society judges right now, because Democrats got rid of that filibuster. We're in a tough spot. I don't want anybody to think that I don't recognize that we're not in a tough spot. And there are things that we want that we need to do. But Democrats also have to make sure when we say we got to get these things, you got to understand there's a lot of different Democratic proposals out there that will never get 50 Democratic votes. A lot of them. There are some that will get the more moderate and conservative Democrats and not the more liberal ones. There's a lot from the left that won't get the moderates, and make sure that folks understand there's a lot of people that have concerns about the filibuster. Just Manchin and Sinema are the only ones that vocalized them. There's a lot of people that have concerns about this. So Democrats really have to figure out, what do we want? Because a lot of the Twitter feeds are with things that you're not going to get 50 Democrats. We have a different view. And that goes back to that big tent. And we haven't had that consistent messaging. Again, I go back to the fact that I think Democrats have really played well with each other the last few months and the last year in the run up to 2020. But that can break down pretty quickly if you got folks that are demanding one way or another, it's their way or the highway. And we can't do that within our own party. If we can get things together within our own party, and I think you'll see some changes made. We've already seen that. We've seen the COVID packages passed with reconciliation. we're likely to see another big infrastructure type bill passed using reconciliation. And those are things that people don't really like to do, but that's when Democrats get together, iron out their differences, and figure a way to get it done. But the problem we got, David, with people screaming and hollering on Twitter all the time, and I see a lot of it too, and I appreciate the voices, but the fact is, a lot of what they're screaming about, they got to understand that what their view might be is not what you could get 50 Democratic senators to vote for. And I go back to this: if we don't get some of the Voting Rights Act done, then forget it anyway, because we're going to lose things for a long time.
Yeah, a whole generation probably here. Nancy Latham just put out a comment here. She said, wait, Mr. Jones just said he does believe that there will be some type of amendment to the filibuster. Can you say more? And how do you see the pathway to this? And how do you see President Biden fitting into it?
I don't know what is being discussed. I wish I did, but there's any number of ways that I think that if you look at what's happening and some of the media and some of the voices are out there, they're talking about carve-outs. They're talking about reform measures. They're talking about interpreting. You know, Robert Byrd, when he was the majority leader, was famous for the ways he would interpret the filibuster rules. And so I think that there is a lot of things in the works. And I believe that, again, I don't know the details on that, but I do believe this with all my heart. And I could be proved wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. But I really think that with the group that is working on this voting rights bill, that they're going to put this out there. They're going to get the public comment. They're going to get their colleagues' comment. They're going to, if they need to tweak it a little bit to get a few more votes, they will. But I don't believe they're going to let it die. One way or another, I believe there's something in the works as part of this that they're talking about that is going to get that bill passed. They just got to get it done soon. So I really believe on voting rights, I can't speak for everything else, but on voting rights, I think there will be some kind of either carve out or enough reform to where they can get this thing done. Again, I could be proven wrong. I just don't believe that Joe Manchin is putting his heart and soul into this bill just to let 50 Republicans flipping the finger.
Yeah, I just saw up there a second ago, someone was saying that the only way the route of the future is watered down bipartisan bills. It's from Ann Blay here, Ann Blay, hopefully I said it right, and actual serious legislation. Do you think that, I don't know if this is watered down or if it's just us working together. Democracy is nasty. It's ugly. It's never, 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
It depends on your perspective. If you want the Green New Deal and you end up getting something that does a lot for climate, but is not the Green New Deal, do you consider it watered down? Probably. If you're on the radical right, do you consider things watered down? If you move a little bit toward the center, of course you do. But it's still things that are getting done. If you're for Medicare for all, is it watered down if you have a public option? Of course it's considered watered down, but a public option is a pretty damn good thing if we could ever get it done. So it's a matter of perspective. And I think sometimes that we often get too caught up in whether or not something is watered down, and we tend to be checklists, and if it doesn't check every box, then we just say, don't fool with it. And we've missed a lot of opportunities, I think, because of that over the years. Because as we did that, and as social media did that, the Congress and the Senate just moved farther apart with their rules. And it's unfortunate that the Senate is not the great deliberative body that it used to be. I think Schumer's pulling it back some, and they've had a lot of debates on the floor, and they've had a lot of amendments. We had hardly any amendments when I was in the United States Senate. McConnell just wouldn't allow them. And it's wrong. And Schumer is doing that. They've had these marathon votes. So it's just, everything is a matter of perspective, folks. But is the $1 trillion package that the Senate just passed with 20 Republicans, is it watered down? Sure, from one perspective, but it's a hell of a lot more than they started out with. So I want to get things done.
Yeah, it's progress, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It's really what it is. Cheryl Johnson just said, Senator, you said correctly that Biden is wounded. How do we help him with that, since the GOP now thinks that they have something to pound him on? Security, Afghanistan, immigrants. This despite the fact that Trump set the removal of troops in motion and made promises to the Taliban to negotiate with them. So how do we help President Biden? What do we do?
It's a great question, and I think we're all still kind of looking for those answers, to be honest with you, because the problem has not been the removal of the troops. The problem, it seems to me, has been the lack of execution and the lack of planning. It's stunning to me that this was not planned for better. I will just tell you, it's stunning. I think if Donald Trump had been elected, we'd have seen the same thing in May, and maybe worse. But we should have had a better planning to evacuate folks, and we just didn't. And unfortunately, I don't think we should point blame everywhere. The one thing I kind of disagreed with the president yesterday, he tended to put a little bit more blame on other people. He took the blame, but he also tended to deflect it. I do think one of the biggest problems was that the Trump administration gave the Taliban credibility. He even talked about inviting them to Camp David. He never did, thank God. People would have gone nuts if that happened. But he elevated them and brought them together, and they totally underestimated. And I think we look, it's just like everything else, man. You got to lick your wounds and let them heal for a little bit. You're going to get beat up. You're going to get gnawed on for some time. And I think we just have to acknowledge that mistakes were made, and this could have been done better. But you know what? We're moving on, because the one thing that the president said that is absolutely true, what has happened in the last 2 weeks is proof positive that we needed to get out. And I didn't always see that, but that's been proof positive for me. And I was over there a couple of years ago. The thing that we have to do, though, where we really have to push back, I think, with some of the radical right, is that we have to take care of these Afghani refugees. We have to take care of the women over there and the girls that are really going to be subject. We've got to make sure that when we see things, that we step up, we get this, and we take care of them somehow, some way. This is going to be a work in progress for a little bit. And I think by the time that the Congress gets back, the Republicans are not going to want to let this go. We need to focus on voting rights. We need to focus on the infrastructure. We need to focus on getting people vaccinated. Yeah. We need to focus on making sure that we continue to keep people safe and healthy in this country. I'm in a state that is just, COVID is raging again. Our hospitals are almost, they're out. We've only got 2 ICU beds, I think, in the entire state left. There's a lot of problems here. And I wish things had gone better for Joe Biden in the last couple of weeks, but they didn't, and we'll live with it and we'll move on. I still support him, and I know you do too.
Yep. And that's the thing. I mean, Biden also, he's been doing an amazing job up until this point of, this is what happens, I think, in the beginning of every presidency too. You have a crisis moment, and that's what makes you president. You have that moment where you have to be a leader, you step up. And sometimes, you saw it with Bill Clinton, we saw it with Obama, you get kicked in the shins a little bit and you have to lick your wounds, like you're saying. I'm with you. We're getting the 9 o'clock point. So I guess the final question I have for you, Senator, is where the hell is Lou?
She's out here running around somewhere. She's here. She's here. She's probably got her wine waiting on me out there at some point.
All right. Well, everybody, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Senator, for your consistent and constant optimism and getting things done and spending a full hour with us to really just give us your unfiltered thoughts. Really means a lot. I know it does to them too.
David, look, let me just say to everybody out there, just keep it up, but just recognize where we are. And sometimes what I really want people to do is not talk to each other, but talk to somebody outside your comfort zone in the right way. Listen to them. David and I got a thing from a group called the Future Majority the other day. And I think this is really important on voting rights. They asked the question in this big poll that they did, and I'm going to run over, so I hope folks hang with me for just a minute. But they asked this question about what worries you most. And for Democrats, it was the things that you would expect. It was voter suppression. It was, the things involving racial equality and social justice, income equality, those kind of things. But for independents and Republicans, their lists were very similar, and it was immigration issues. It was voter fraud, not voter suppression. And we need to, sometimes when we're getting out on Twitter and we're doing other things, we need to be looking at some of the other things that we're saying and meet people where they're coming from in a very positive way, and to say, this is what we can do. This is what this bill does. Because the problem that I think we often find ourselves in is that we just talk in our silos and we talk to ourselves. And we got to meet people. If we want to make sure that they understand and see where we go, we got to meet people. We got to talk to them. And that means getting outside your comfort zone, not as a bully, but as somebody who can just listen and understand. And there are so many people that believe this election was stolen. And instead of challenging, remember, the minute you say it's a big lie, you're attacking Donald Trump, who they voted for. And they're going to immediately turn you off. And all you've got to do is just say, well, you know what? I understand. I disagree with you, but let's look at these laws, and let's look at what's really going on out there. And let's look, does this law going to protect? Tell me how this is going to protect you from voter fraud. It's not. National standards will. Help me get behind national standards, because I want to help you feel better about the election security. And I want you to help me feel better about access to the ballot box. And together we can make this country great.
I mean, that's it, and it's tough. I mean, I have an entire Republican family. I'm the only Democrat, in my entire family. So, going to Thanksgiving is torture, and having these conversations. Most of the time they just want to fight, they just want to have an argument about that. And, it feels like there's no getting, I know we're going over time now. Sorry, DemCast, Nick and Lori and Jamie there. But a lot of the time for me, it's really tough to have those conversations, because you're just going to get screamed at. You're going to get screamed over. No one wants to listen to you. No one wants to listen to each other. How? I mean, that's and even on social media, it's the same thing. We have Republican trolls and Russian bots and, all that stuff. But then you go home and your family just thinks you're a complete asshole, so communist liberal, like, what do we do here?
Well, I mean, look, you just can't let the bastards get you down. Bottom line, just, we just got to keep standing up. Joe Biden tells a story all the time about his dad. Champ, you just got to pick yourself up and get back at it again. And, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to do us a damn bit of good to just get in fights. If somebody wants to fight, just say, fine. I'm going to go talk to somebody else that I can reason with. Let me tell you something, guys. There was a really good article. There were two articles. If y'all look at AL.com, which is the Alabama news media, there were two really good articles this week about how members of the Alabama legislature, after George Floyd's death, a couple of Republicans called a couple of the Black members of the legislature, and how they met in secret for quite a while and had some really serious conversations. And it's a really good article. Now, the fact that they're out in the open now probably will destroy all their political careers, but it was the kind of thing that needs to happen, because, there were things that the Black legislators could literally sit down and educate. There was one of those legislators who had never heard of redlining. One of the Republicans had never knew what they were talking about with redlining. And so they explained that, and they actually got some bills done together. And so it is possible. It is possible, but you can only do it when you meet people and not just, come in with your fist drawn. And if somebody comes at you with their fist drawn, just, you don't have to get in a fight. Nobody wins a fight these days. Nobody wins a fight.
Well, at the end of this, final thoughts, do you think we can take the House or keep the House and keep the Senate going into 2022? What's your belief there? Give us some of your, take us to church. That's what I want to hear from you.
Look, we can, we can, but it's up to us. I mean, we can absolutely take to increase our margins in the House and take the Senate. The numbers are in our favor in the Senate to increase that margin. We can do it, but it is going to depend on us. It is not going to depend on necessarily whether or not we pass a $3 trillion infrastructure bill. It's going to be about who we are and what we talk to those people. And if we can get enough folks in that, whether you like it or not, the middle is going to decide these elections. It's those independent voters in the middle that are going to decide these elections. And we absolutely can do it because we need to remind people that it was the Democrats who gave us Social Security. It was Democrats who gave us Medicare and Medicaid. It is Democrats who gave us the 40-hour work week and the minimum wage. It's Democrats who want to raise that minimum wage and get people and their incomes up again. It was Democrats who passed the child tax credit. It was Democrats who were doing the things that mean so much to people who sit down at their kitchen tables every day and talk about the problems that they've got in the world and how to educate their kids and how they want their kids to have a better life than what they've had. That has been what Democrats have done. And we've lost that. We've lost that in the past. We've lost it because we play a little bit too loose, or we favor this, or we favor that, or sometimes we go all in for something and won't budge off of it. And we let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And it hurts us with those very voters. And we can absolutely do it, David. I mean, look what happened in 2018. And by the way, 2018, we had a huge majority in the House. And it was because of those moderate voices that flipped those seats that got there. Some of it's lost in 2020 with the Trump tsunami, but we can get those back. We can take governorships. We can take Senate. We've got to keep people like Raphael Warnock and Maggie Hassan and Mark Kelly. But we've got opportunities for pickups. There's no question we're going to have some opportunities for pickup. So can we do it? Absolutely. The question is, will we do it? Do we have enough of the fortitude to get out there and, as Joe Biden's dad say, pull ourselves up and just take it back and say, this is by God who we are. And we're not going to let you, whether you want to wear a mask or not, or get a vaccine or not, we're not going to let you do it. We're going to talk to your people and we can get them back. I think there's incredible opportunities out there, incredible opportunities.
We have, you said earlier, we have the bigger stones. Isn't that what the line was?
I do, compared to you. But
the whole time I'm trying not to laugh with thinking about that. Jamie, at the end of this thing, she said she found out last week that sundown towns still exist.
Yeah.
And, this is a moment for me on the campaign. We went to Daphne in 2017, and that was the last sundown town in Alabama. By the way, if you guys ever get a chance, watch that speech. It was probably one of my favorite ones that the senator did. But talk to us about that a little bit, and then I guess we can hop off here and let everybody go to bed or eat.
Well, the sundown towns are the towns that literally had the signs that told African Americans they needed to get out of town before dark, and they meant it. And one of the last sundown towns was down in Daphne, but one of them also is in Coleman, Alabama. And guess who's coming to Coleman, Alabama this weekend? Donald J. Trump is coming to Coleman, Alabama. There's an article today that I read again in AL.com where they had the Rock the South concert, and the people and the healthcare professions in North Alabama are scared to death about that was a super spreader. And now you got Trump coming on top of it. It's really, I think, fitting that Trump comes when you go in and I don't try. I had a fair amount of support up in Coleman. There's some great people and it's a wonderful little town, but there's still elements up there. When you ride in, you go past the Willingham auto yard, the salvage yard, and there's as big a Confederate flag as you've ever seen flying on the flagpole there. And that's the city where Donald Trump's going to speak. Okay. That's where he's going to speak, in a pasture somewhere, and it's going to be a super spreader. And that's the thing about, I think, that sets us apart. We want to promote people, all people, and we want to do it in a way that's positive. We want to get them good jobs and good education. We don't want to divide people. And that's what they do. That's what the radical right has been doing, and we've got to stop it. And so I hope folks will get together and understand when you see this new bill coming out. It may not be everything you want, folks, okay? But we got to stop these wildfires that are going on around us, and we can do it. We can do it, and I think we're going to get some help in the Senate. I'm really anxious to see what this bill is going to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the comments here who are yelling "abso-damn-lutely." They like you saying that. So I think with
That's a
that,
good Southern expression, David. You know that.
oh man, you have so many of them. What's it, all hat, no cattle? There's, that was during that speech when you threw that in at the end at Roy Moore. I still laugh about that because it's just such a perfect line. But I mean, we went over. It's 9/11 here on the eastern side, so we can let everybody eat, go to bed. But Senator, thanks so much for jumping on. You're my favorite dude. And everybody loves you here. So let's get to work. Let's listen to what the senator's saying in the messaging, everybody, too.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity. Let's do it again sometime.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you
DemCast.
so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for
anytime.
coming.
Bye-bye.
And then
Yep.
next week, we have Ted Corkerone from All of the Line to talk about redistricting. So that should be a good one.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Senator.
All right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys. Have a
Thanks
good
for
one.
coming.